You're listening to Turi Ryder's She Said What podcast. I'm Turi, along with Marcy Persky. In this installment, you will be figuratively immersed in two different kinds of bloodbaths. The ones the royals of England are talking about, and the ones the royals of Washington, D.C. are bringing to fruition in a completely nonpartisan way. Amazing, right?
I was just reading, I don't remember why. The headline was, a royal tradition that Kate Middleton has forbidden, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, what kind of royal tradition could be so bad that Princess Kate or Queen Kate or whatever she is, Duchess or, I don't know, married to a really, really ugly guy. Well, whatever we call her, sacrificial Kate.
Sacrificial Kate, yeah.
Yeah. And I had to know what it was. So the tradition up until now, okay, they make all the kids go hunting, like all royal kids.
Oh, dear.
Have to know how to shoot a gun and how to kill. But the first
People
kill,
or pets? Or
No,
animals?
animals.
Wild animals.
Like foxes and stuff. I don't
Well,
know.
we do that in North Dakota. That's a rule. If you want to be the governor of North Dakota, you
Well,
have to.
that's not the whole thing.
Oh, wasn't it
After
the North? Is
they
she North
shoot
Dakota?
it.
Wait. Is she North Dakota or South Dakota? The pet
She's-
killer.
Oh, Christine Ohm
Yeah.
or whatever her name is.
North or South?
I think she's north.
Okay, so
And I mean, I live in a big hunting area
Yeah.
too, because we've got way too many elk and edible things, I guess, running around.
okay.
But we are not hunters in this house.
We have no problem with hunters. If you eat what you kill, you're fine by me. Go ahead.
Right. But not this part. This is what I'm going to tell you. Here's the tradition that she's forbidding for her children. When a royal child makes its first kill,
Yes.
they have to be bathed in the blood of the dead animal.
That's disgusting. I don't
Isn't
even believe
that
it. I don't
gross?
believe it at all.
No, William and Harry both said that they had to do that.
I don't believe it
They
at all.
smear the blood all over the kids.
I do not
Look it up.
believe
Look
it.
it up.
I don't believe it.
Look it up.
Well, it would
Look it up.
explain a lot of royal behavior, I have to say.
Yeah.
I will look it up, and if it's true, I will be even more disgusted.
Well, yeah. Gross. But it's not going to happen with her kids. So that's what I learned today.
What you learned in school, assuming
What
that
I learned
the
by
thing-
avoiding reading anything else that might make me disturbed. That's all we have to say on that.
now I'm thinking the Super Bowl is an entertainment, not so bad. Nobody has to be bathed in anybody's blood.
What? I know. Isn't that gross? It's got to be stinky, too. Wouldn't you imagine, like, animal blood is stinky?
That smells like blood. Just
It
blood.
smells like blood. When are you smelling blood?
Well, again,
Listen.
I have to refer you back to the linen question. It's been a little while.
Shut up.
I'm older. None of the kids has really cut himself for quite a while, but I do recall having to.
Did you used to smell it?
Well, you can smell it.
You would lean down and smell
No,
cut
but you
before
can
you put a
You
Band-Aid on
can
it?
smell it.
It's-
How would you know? You pass out if there's even a tiny cut on the end of one kid's hangnail. You pass out. How would you know?
Well, yeah, I know. I don't know what blood smells like.
It smells. It has a smell.
Tell me about your trip.
Well, this recent trip was to Washington, D.C. to see the Big Cutie. And as we record this, the whirligig of chaos that is unleashed right now on Washington, D.C., and I say this no matter your party, it is chaotic. People, we went to religious services with our kid Friday night, and instead of the traditional greeting, the greeting was substituted with, do you still have your job? Do you have a job?
Yeah.
Do you still have? This is as political probably as this podcast ever will get. But all of these young people, because it was a young people's congregation, it was really very sad. They came to Washington with hope in their hearts to serve the country, to serve the people, to serve the public, and they are shattered. And it was really, really
Yeah.
It's just a disturbing. It was disturbing and very sad. And even if you like every single thing, every single overall goal, assuming that you do, and we don't get political here, there is a nice way to do something and a cruel way to do something. And
Yes.
I will say, for the record, that I think sending out nasty notes and threatening people, and the letter, as I record this, the most recent letter is the one that's getting all kinds of pushback, like tell us 5 things you did at work today, or tell us 5 things you did at
I
work
was
this
like,
week.
I blew my nose. I went to the bathroom.
Well, to be honest, I think the way that a lot of people are spending their week who work for the federal government is at least one day is spent trying to find out who still has a job and comforting people who don't.
I've heard that it's very difficult to know if you still have a job or not because as soon as they decide to lay you off, they cut off your access to everything. So you can't even like look into your computer, get log into your computer.
Well, there are people who are emailing people in their department, if you still have a job, could you please go get my employment records from HR? And then there's nobody in HR. I mean, it's really chaotic. And
Well,
I
my eldest
don't say that as a
child,
partisan thing. It is
yeah,
chaotic over there.
this is nonpartisan as well, but my eldest child was in DC the same time as you with the Postal Workers Union, which has been holding meetings and protests out on the Capitol lawn. And now it's time for all their meetings.
Ah,
This was an already planned convention to discuss contract and that kind of stuff.
yep.
But when the postmaster general walked out last week and it was announced that the current administration wants to make the post office part of the Commerce Department, because the post office has always been independent.
Yes. And
Um,
nonpartisan.
yeah. So yes, my eldest is there, and she was actually chosen randomly to speak on behalf of Colorado and Wyoming postal employees to their members of Congress. So she'll be getting up and making a speech tomorrow.
Ooh.
Yep.
Well, it's interesting because I have friends, as you know, and you know people too, who do not share our political views particularly, and I don't know who's more rattled. I really don't. I just don't know who's more shocked and disturbed by all of this. But I will tell you that Washington D.C. is a place you don't want to be right now. Just don't. But we walked around in the beautiful weather, and we almost made it to the zoo. We didn't quite make it to the zoo on time, but we
I
went
love that too.
and we saw lots of galleries and museums. And this is a weird thing. There's a very famous photographer who has photographed every president informally, usually, since I think Eisenhower was where he began, and he has photographed everyone since then. Music photography, he was the guy who came over with the Beatles when they came over from London, and they had a big, big show of his work. Harry Benson, that's it, Harry Benson. The photography in this gallery, and it was free to come in, and it was beautifully presented and hung. But what the heck is with people who don't check the cards next to the art? Isn't that anybody's job? And it's not even a federal museum. It's a private gallery. Isn't there anybody, for example, on the very first card, it said his interest was piqued, Peaked. And it just went downhill from there. And the ultimate insult was then they decided that the Chicago Seven were tried in New Haven, Connecticut.
What?
Yeah, that's what?
What?
Yeah,
Who is writing this?
that's my question. And I don't understand how anyone could go through this exhibit. And there were stragglers, like sentences that were obviously in old versions of cards that nobody had edited out. So you'd be reading along and there'd be some sentence that dropped in from Mars. You'd be reading, for example, about the Kennedy kids, and it would say, slow boat on a turtle ride. And you'd be like, what?
I wonder how much that job pays.
I don't
If
know.
I can do it from home.
Uh, and when do you bestir yourself with all the things there are to do in the world to write a little note and say, clearly you've invested a lot of money in renting this gallery and printing these photos and having them hung. And perhaps you'd like to take a close look at the editorial content next to these pictures, because it's not my job. But I should point out that the Chicago 7 are called the Chicago 7 for a reason. And they mislabeled the white people and the black people. I mean, like, really? Is that hard? Abby Hoffman looks nothing like Bobby Seale. Nothing.
Yeah. So did you leave that critique?
No, I'm trying to decide. It's kind of like a restaurant review where the food is just so bad that you know if you start it'll be 3 pages, and so you just don't.
See, I would have just written simply on a piece of paper, I think it's great that you let third graders write the descriptions.
This was consistent because we also wandered into a gallery, Stanford in Washington. Stanford University has some program apparently where you're in Washington, and one of their programs is museum management or museum curatorial or something. You get into Stanford, then you go to Washington. I don't even know how this program works, but I do know that they hung a big card, 18 by 12, written by one of their students. Mind you, you can get into Stanford and not know the difference between know and known. Who was known to be, if your kid did not get into Stanford and your kid knows the difference between know and known, you were done a great injustice.
If your kid spends any time at all on Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, that's all you see. Nobody knows how to spell. Nobody knows the right words for the difference between peak and peekaboo.
Stanford.
It's
freaking Stanford.
They still grew up with electronics in their hands and in front of their eyes.
Stanford,
2 years
for
old.
crying out loud, Stanford. What?
No.
What? I mean, this
All the
is
same.
supposed
They had better computers than the rest of us, but
the most elite of the most elite, and they don't know that. I don't know. I felt at the same time I was outraged. I also felt like a snob. I felt like maybe it's wrong to require that people know the difference between know and known. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe I'm the one. Kind of
No.
Maybe Frankie was the one who was wrong to leave his fajitas on the counter.
Yeah, there you go. I want to know what's wrong with the professors or the grad students or whoever's job it is to look at what these students are doing and not correct it.
Well, here's what I have to say. The job that is about to go extinct, everybody's talking about how AI is going to ruin this job and AI is going to ruin that job. I think that it won't. The job that will be gone first is proofreader. And it's not like AI will do a better job. It's just that we'll all be expected not to care.
We'll all be expected to just be able to sound that word out.
Which really piqued me. Peaked. I was really
Peekaboo.
piqued. All right. Well, these are first world problems, really. These are.
Oh, here's another first world problem.
Yes.
Have you noticed that we have been talking smoothly now for the entire time without my screen freezing up once?
Yeah.
Well, I tore a page.
You tore a book
Out of the.
First, you got a dish full of sinks, and now you tore a book out of the page.
I know. I need a nap. That's what I'm going to blame it on.
Okay.
The little editor in my head is already sleeping, and no, we have new internet out here, new and improved, and there's only 2 houses that have them, and I was the loudest and most obnoxious, and just kept calling every day.
We're about to say you tore a page out of the Turi Writer book, is what you were about to say?
By being loud and obnoxious and getting what I want. because I got for some reason, they only had equipment for 2 houses. And we got one, and I don't care who else has the other one, probably the governor or something. But we're stabilized.
Well,
Ta-da.
the internet is anyway. The rest of our lives.
No, I have to say, I could use some new equipment in my brain. At least last night when I was putting salt in the fajitas.
Thanks for listening to Tory Writer's She Said What podcast. We're glad you found us, and I hope you'll find my book, She Said What? A Life on the Air. It's all true, but I've changed the names of the people and the radio stations and a bunch of other stuff because I'd prefer not to get sued. You can find it at your neighborhood independent bookstore or on Amazon.